Hi, everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers retrial. We are reading through the transcript, and we're on part 23 of the state's case. We are continuing with the testimony of Brian Andersen, who is one of the uncles, one of the brothers of Kitty Menendez, the Andersen side of the family. He's one of the brothers who have been in support of the death penalty for their nephews, and also was suing them and the estate. And yeah, they've been opposed to the brothers being resentenced and getting out. Well, anyways, Brian and Milton are the two brothers. They are no longer with us. They both have passed away. So by the time the brothers were resentenced, there was no one in the family opposing their resentencing. So, but this is one of the brothers, Brian Andersen, and we read in the last episode that we read through the voir dire, so there was no jury present this time. They're going to be in front of the jury. So this is Brian Andersen with the jury present. They had their arguments and everything, and now we're back from break, and let's get into it. So there's some things that he's going to have to come back and testify to in the next day. It might be a little bit longer. I'm having a bad pain day for my hips, so I'm gonna go cameraless, and you'll just hear my voice as I read through. And I was gonna say something else. I don't remember. There was one other announcement I wanted to make, and I forgot it. So, anyways, let's begin. It'll come to me, I'm sure. I'm just not feeling the. Hold on. Here, let's get started. Please hit the like button. And let's begin. As a reminder, Brian Andersen and Ms. Nahara is going to be doing the questioning for the state. Court says, all right, what is it you wish to talk about? Ms. Nahara says, the stipulation. Or Ms. Abramson says, do you want to do the steps first? Ms. Nahara says, it doesn't matter. Your Honor, one thing is we had one stipulation outside the presence of the jury, and we also agreed on the other four, so we can do them whenever the court would like to do them in front of the jury. The court says, if you are ready to enter into your stipulations, you can do that now in front of the jury and start up outside the presence of the witnesses. Ms. Nahara says, and there is one we would like to do outside the presence of the jury, and that is with regards to the redacted exhibit. And basically, counsel, will you stipulate that Exhibit 142 is a true and accurate copy of Exhibit 141, which has been redacted in conformance with the court's previous rulings? Ms. Amerson says so stipulated. Mr. Gessler says so stipulated. Ms. Nahara says, and that would be the redacted escape plans. Ms. Amerson says, before we do anything, it is my understanding that with respect to Mr. Andersen, the parameters with respect to his testimony concerning the camcorder are contained within transcript pages 22563 through 22568 of the previous trial and further, and that's admissible as to both defendants. And then with respect to what's admissible solely against Lyle Menendez, that's contained on 22873 and 22874 of the previous trial transcript, and it's our expectation that we're going to hear the exact same words because on 22568, the part that's admissible against both, he testified to a statement made by Mrs. Kitty Menendez, and the statement that she was making to Erik Menendez is contained on line 1 of 22568, That statement was, "You kids have got to stop doing these things." And the statement was not related to spending. It was simply because all that's happening then is that Eric left the camcorder on the airplane and he is going to try to go back and get it. And there isn't any suggestion that he spent money on the camcorder. In fact, there is never any suggestion that he did any pre-homicide spending of any kind, and not of the kind to make his parents angry. So I want to make sure that statement, the statement, quote, "You kids have got to stop doing these things," comes out exactly that way, and I would agree to counsel leading to make sure it comes out that way, and there is no question about any additional statements because we don't have any discovery on them or any meaning to be ascribed to that. Mr. Gessler says, "I have the same problem with 22-874, Your Honor, and I also would have no objection to counsel reading the exact quotation, which is in the future tense and has no reference to the past tense. And that statement is, I asked Jose what happened with the camcorder incident, and he said, well, I've got to have a major conversation with my son Lyle. He has to get the message that we're not going to be supporting them for the rest of their lives." I think Ms. Abramson has an objection to the word them, and I want to make sure that the witness doesn't vary from that. So I would have no objection to him being led to the exact words used so we don't get into the same problems as at the last trial. Ms. Abramson says, and I would ask, since before this was only admitted in front of Lyle's jury and not Eric Menendez's jury, since we only have the one jury, that statement be redacted to read supporting him the rest of his life. Mr. Khan says, I would oppose that. We already litigated that, and this was a statement that was made by Jose Menendez, and the statement that the witness recalls, he was going to speak to Lyle Menendez. He was expressing his intent at that time, and his intent at that time was that he was not going to be supporting them for the rest of their lives. That makes no sense. If you're talking to Lyle specifically, you would tell him, I'm not going to support you, but whatever. Ms. Aronson says there's no indication that Lyle Menendez, assuming this statement, this conversation ever occurred, which we don't know, that Lyle Menendez ever repeated any portion of that conversation to Eric Menendez, so it has no relevance as to Eric Menendez. The court says, well, it's not being offered as to Eric Menendez, so these are just the words that were uttered, by Jose Menendez of his state of mind. Ms. Abramson says, well, I would ask then that the jury be admonished that that is not being offered for the truth, but only as to reflect Jose's state of mind at the time it was made, and it's not a statement that they aren't in fact going to be supporting them. Mr. Khan said, I would oppose that. It is being offered for the truth. It indicates his intent of mind at the time, which was in fact what he intended to do, and so it does come in for the truth of the matter. Ms. Abramson says, for the truth of the matter, Your Honor, it's pure hearsay what Jose Menendez is intending to do. The only relevance is what impact it might have had on Lyle, assuming it was ever even said. The court says it was his state of mind and what he was going to say to someone else, and that's all it's been received for and not for any other purpose. As to what Jose Menendez would have ultimately ended up doing, it really is not received for that purpose, but really as to what he was going to say as to Lyle Menendez. Isn't that what you're offering? Mr. Khan says, yes. The court says, so it's received for that purpose as to the state of mind of Jose Menendez to have this conversation and what he was going to say. God, this judge is a little biased, don't you think? Ms. Amerson says, is there some way the court can explain that to the jury so that laymen will understand it? The court says, well, I think really, quite frankly, it's the type of thing that's best dealt with in argument rather than a limiting instruction. If you want another instruction, exactly what did you want me to say? Ms. Abramson said, well, it's what Mr. Gessler wants to say because it's his client. Mr. Gessler says, well, I think that's correct, Your Honor, that it should be limited to the state of mind of Mr. Jose Menendez at the moment the conversation was made. It's not intended for the truth of the matter asserted. The court says, do you wish to be heard further on that? Mr. Khan says, no, I don't think that we should inject the phrase, it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. That I think just confuses the issue. I don't think any admonishment is necessary to the jury at all, and if an admonishment is to be given to the jury, it should simply be the statement is being received for the purpose of indicating or proving what was the intent of Jose Menendez at that point in time. Mr. Gessler says that's exactly wrong. Not intent, just state of mind. The court says, well, as said, I think that's best left for the argument rather than for instructions and limitations of the nature of the evidence. It's an exception for the hearsay rule, or is being received for some purpose, and the purpose is showing the state of mind. Mr. Gessler says, yes, but the jury doesn't know it's limited to the state of mind. The court says, what is it you're concerned about? Mr. Gessler says, I am concerned that the jury be instructed that it's limited only to the state of mind of Jose Menendez and not infer more into it. The court says, what is it that you think they might infer? Mr. Gessler says that it proves that a conversation did occur when it's only circumstantial evidence that it might have occurred. This is a statement made some weeks before the deaths, and I think the jury should be given exactly the limitation that it's meant for. The limitation that it's only there for the state of mind at the time. Court says, well, it shows his state of mind for various reasons. One of them is whether or not he had cut them off or intended to cut them off in the future and all sorts of things. Mr. Gessler says, I don't think it goes that far when he says we are not going to be supporting them for the rest of their lives. I don't think that gets into that. Tomorrow, I am going to write them out of the will. Now that's a stretch. It's not, yeah, they're two different statements. It's not the same thing at all. He didn't say that. That was an example, just in case you were confused. He's saying it's not like saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to write them out of the will, whereas he's saying eventually we're going to have to cut them off, like eventually they're going to have to get their own jobs. But I mean, Lyle was still in school and Erik was just going to college, so I don't know, it's not like that was happening like instantly. So I don't know. All right, Ms. Abramson says supporting them assumes you're going to sign the check. The court says, it seems to me it really is offered to show the state of mind of the declarant, so I will indicate it's being received for that purpose without going into the language of the hearsay rule. Well, okay, so it's good that they're getting an instruction at least, because I think it does confuse matters. So I will tell the jury it's being received to show the state of mind of Mr. Menendez at the time of that statement. Mr. Gessler says, okay. The court says, all right, are we ready to proceed then? We will have the stipulation stated and then we will go on with Mr. Andersen. Let's get the jury out, please. And the jury enters the room and the following proceedings were held. The court says, hi, hello. We knew you were there all the time. We have been discussing various issues, and it took us a while to iron out some matters to deal with as far as testimony of the next two witnesses that will be coming up, and also yesterday. And in the last few days, the lawyers have been working out some stipulations or agreements as to some witnesses who otherwise would be testifying. Instead of that, they have been able to work out some agreements on certain issues so they won't have to call those witnesses. So, at this point, what I'm going to do is ask the lawyers to state the stipulations to you. You might want to make notes of them so that later on you will know what they were. Again, a stipulation is an agreement between the parties as to the certain facts that are not in dispute, so these will be the stipulations that will be announced at this point. Ms. Nahara says, thank you, Your Honor. And counsels, do you stipulate that Exhibit 147 is an accurate business record, which reflects the transaction therein? That the records depict that Lyle Menendez attempted to purchase a patio home at 24 Yeager Road in Princeton, that he placed 26,500 yeah, 26,500 down on this patio home. That the purchase was to be a cash transaction, that it was never completed, that Lyle Menendez never obtained title to the property. So stipulated, counsel? Mr. Gessler says, I do so stipulate. Court says, all right. Miss Abramson says the evidence is coming in only against Lyle Menendez, Your Honor. The court says, yes, yes, that's a stipulation relating to evidence that is only admissible and received as to Lyle Menendez. This is the whole confusion thing as to we only have one jury this time as opposed to two separate juries where you could kick Eric's jury out of the room and then have evidence presented solely for Lyle and not Erik. And then the jury wouldn't be tainted with that information about Lyle. But here we are with one jury, and the rules are completely changed this time around with Judge Stanley Weisberg, who took it in upon his infinite wisdom to just, change every ruling from before. But whatever. All right. Ms. Nahara says, and Your Honor, if I may correct the record, I was looking at the wrong document. The address would be 9 Hampstead Court. My apologies, counsel. Everyone except the revised stipulation. Mr. Gessler says I will still stipulate. The court says, and which exhibit number were you referring to? Ms. Nahara says, Exhibit 147. Court says, all right, perhaps we can get that exhibit out and make sure that that's the right number. Ms. Nahara says, I have it, Your Honor. I just checked everything. Court says, and that's 147. You would see why he'd be a little hesitant to believe her at face value because she just made a mistake as to the address. But she says, yes, it's Exhibit 147. Court says, okay, your next stipulation. Ms. Nahara says the next stipulation, which is in regard to Exhibit 148, is Counsel, will you stipulate that Exhibit 148 is an accurate business record which reflects the transaction therein, and the records depict that Lyle Menendez attempted to purchase a condominium at 112 Biscayne number 7 in Princeton, that he placed 12,900 down on this patio home, that the purchase was to be a cash transaction, that it was never completed, that Lyle Menendez never obtained title to this property. Counsel, do you stipulate? Mr. Gessler says, I do so stipulate. Ms. Nahara says, thank you. The court says, and again, that stipulation reflects to evidence admitted and received only as to Lyle Menendez. Ms. Nahara says, Counsels, do you stipulate that Exhibit 100 is an accurate business record which reflects a life insurance policy therein, that the individual covered by this insurance policy was Jose E. Menendez, that the policy was issued on or about January 22nd, 1987, and that the agent who sold it was Marta Cano, that the death claim was filed on August 23rd, 1989 by Marta Cano, that on September 8th, 1989, a check for $200,936.91 was issued to Lyle Menendez, that on September 8th, 1989, a check for the same amount was issued to Erik Menendez, that on September 15th, 1989, a check for 125,000, 800, what did I say? 125,810. Why can I not speak? You you can see on the screen. 1,200, 200. What am I saying? 100? I can't. I don't know what happened to my brain. This is why I don't do numbers. My brain jumbles everything. $125,810.71. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, I don't know what happened to my brain there. Same number with the same. So on the 8th, they got a check for 200,000. On the 15th, they got a check for 120,000. Both of them. Ms. Abramson says, and that those checks represented proceeds of that insurance policy. Ms. Nahara says, correct. Ms. Abramson says, so stipulated. Mr. Gessler says, so stipulated, Your Honor. Ms. Nahara says, that's fine. Court says, all right, that stipulation is noted, and that is relating to Exhibit 100 and is in evidence. The stipulation is evidence admitted as to both defendants. Ms. Nahara says, final stipulation. Counsels, do you stipulate that on August 24, 1989, American Express account number 32, excuse me, I'm not reading that whole number out, belonged to Jose E. Menendez. That on August 24th, 1989, 3 Rolex watches and 2 money clips were charged on that account at Slavic's jewelry store. That the charge was placed through Mary Maher. That the amount paid, or that the account paid that charge. So Jose's credit card account. Mr. Gessler says, so stipulated. So does Ms. Abramson. The court says, okay, that stipulation is noted, and that is evidence submitted as to both defendants. And you may call your next witness. The people call Brian Andersen. All right, step forward, please. The court says, okay, Mr. Anderson, you are still under oath. Would you state your full name for the jury, please? The witness does so, and he spells it. And the judge says, you may examine the witness. Mr. Khan says, Mr. Anderson, were you related to Kitty Menendez? Yes, sir. What was your relationship to that woman? Kitty was my sister. I would like to direct your attention back to early August of 1989. Do you remember? Can you tell us where you lived in early August of 1989? In unincorporated, oh hey, Downers Grove, Illinois. I used to live like a town over from there. All right, so he lived in unincorporated Downers Grove, Illinois. And did your sister Kitty Menendez visit you sometime in early August? Yes, sir. And was she with someone when she visited you? She initially came home, or came alone, sorry. Her son Erik joined her. And were you preparing to go somewhere during that time of the visit? After that visit, we were going to a tennis match in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And how are you planning on getting up to Kalamazoo, Michigan? In my airplane. I think there has been video that like old video that surfaced at the time of the crimes, and we've seen it, on the news has played clips of it, and I've seen it, even in recent like social media clips of the brothers getting on a plane with their parents, and I think that might have been Brian's plane or one of the Andersons the uncle's planes. I don't know how many people own a plane. Apparently, Brian does. He has his own plane. Um, sorry, that just, not too many people have their own planes, so that kind of got me. All right. And do you remember when in August this visit took place? Early August, first week in August. Now, sometime after the arrival of your sister and your nephew at your home, did you hear a conversation between the two of them concerning a camcorder that had been left on an airplane? Yes, sir. And what was it that brought uh, your attention to such a conversation? Erik, when he got up the morning after he arrived, wanted to use the telephone privately, which I allowed him to do, and he called. And then later after using the phone, a call came back in from the airlines, and when Kitty interrogated Erik as to the conversation, it was at that point that Erik conveyed that he had left a camcorder in the overhead baggage compartment of the airplane. And as you listen to that conversation concerning the camcorder, can you tell us what the demeanor of your sister, Kitty Menendez, was during the course of that conversation? After learning that the camcorder existed, Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object to that as speculation on the part of the witness. The court says sustained, the answer is stricken. Ms. Abramson says, can the jury be admonished? The court says yes. Whenever an answer is stricken or anything is stricken, the jury should disregard it in its entirety. Mr. Khan continues. If you would, just describe her demeanor during the course of that conversation with Erik Menendez concerning the camcorder. She was very upset with Erik. Okay, and at the time that do you recall her saying, and did you previously testify that Ms. Aberson says we're going to object to the form of the question as compound calls for hearsay? Overruled. Do you recall her saying, and did you previously testify that she said to her son, you kids have got to stop doing these things? Yes, sir. Sometime after that conversation, did you see your sister and your nephew go somewhere? They went to the airport. And did you see them when they get back? Or when they got back, sorry. Yes, sir. Did they have anything with them when they got back that you had not previously seen before? They had a bag that contained a camcorder. And sometime after that incident, did you then proceed as you had planned to Kalamazoo, Michigan? Yes, sir. Now, once you got to Kalamazoo, Michigan, did you see Jose Menendez in that city? Yes, sir. And did you have a discussion with him concerning the camcorder? Yes, sir. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, at this point, I'd ask the jury to be admonished that the discussion is admissible only against Lyle Menendez. The court says yes. In reference to a conversation the witness had with Jose Menendez in Kalamazoo, this particular conversation is admitted only as to Lyle Menendez, and it is received to show the state of mind of Jose Menendez at the time he made the statement. Mr. Khan says, Now, how much time elapsed from that time that you heard that conversation between your sister and your nephew, in which she was very upset, to the time that you had a conversation with Jose Menendez concerning the camcorder in Kalamazoo? It would have been somewhere between 2 and 4 days. 2, 3, 4 days. And in that conversation with Jose Menendez, did Jose Menendez say to you, I've got to have a major conversation with my son Lyle. He has got to get the message that we're not going to be supporting them for the rest of their lives? Yes, sir. And how long was that before you learned that Jose Menendez had his life taken? Ms. Amerson says, assumes facts, not in evidence, Your Honor. The court says overruled. The witness says 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. Mr. Khan says, now, sometime after you learned, well, can you tell us, do you recall how that was that you learned that your sister and Jose Menendez had their lives taken? I received a phone call at my office in midday on the Monday after the homicides from Marcy Eisenberg. And after receiving that phone call, did you make travel arrangements? Yes, sir. And what did you arrange to do at that time? Travel to Los Angeles. And can you tell us, do you recall when it was that you arrived in Los Angeles? Very early in the morning on Wednesday, the 23rd, just after midnight. And do you recall where you went after you arrived in Los Angeles? As I recall, I was driven by a limousine to the Bellage Hotel. And where's the Bellage Hotel located? It's in Los Angeles near as I remember it, near the Studio City area, somewhere there. And sometime after your arrival in Los Angeles, did you go to the home of the Menendez family and see the defendants? Yes, sir. Now, sometime after your arrival in Los Angeles, did you receive word concerning a safe that had been placed somewhere? Yes, sir. And do you recall who you received word from? I believe it was from Lyle. And what did Lyle tell you at the time that you learned about the safe? That they had taken the family safe to a friend's house. And after learning of that transportation, what, if anything, did you do? I spoke with a friend on the phone, if I remember right. And after that, I went to the house. And who did you go to the house with? As I recall, with Carlos Beralt. And did you travel in the same car with him? I believe so, yes. And do you recall where Eric and Lyle Menendez were at the time that you and Carlos Baralt traveled to this house to where the safe was? We were following them. So they were in a separate vehicle in front of you? Yes, sir. Now, can you tell us what happened after you arrived at the home where the safe was? Observed the safe sitting in the middle of the garage floor. And were some arrangements made for the safe to be opened? Yes, sir. Can you tell us what occurred as far as that's concerned? A locksmith or a lock company, safe company, came to drill the safe so that it could be opened. And do you recall seeing someone arrive for the purpose of drilling into the safe? Yes, sir. And was there a discussion with them after their arrival? Yes, sir. And was payment made to them at that time? Yes, sir. And who made this payment? I did. And after the payment was made, can you tell us what you observed happened next? The I was asked that the safe only be opened in the presence of Lyle and Eric and that Carlos and I not be around at the time that the safe was opened. Now, who was it that requested that you and Carlos Baralt not be present at the time that the safe was opened? Lyle Menendez. And do you recall what he said to you when he made that request to you? He said that he was concerned there may be some things in the safe that could be embarrassing to his parents and that he wanted to protect the good name of his parents and that he asked that I respect his wishes. And that's exactly what I said would have been the reason why he wouldn't want anybody else in the room. He wanted to make sure that there was nothing like rhymes with corn or graphic photos of them when they were younger and without clothing on, things like that. They didn't want those those types of things that they knew their parents had proclivities to. They didn't want that to come out in public, and they were trying to protect their parents' reputation. That is what I fully 100% believe. And that just corroborated what I thought. All right. Moving on. Mr. Khan says, and how did you respond to that request? I didn't think there would be anything in the safe that could possibly be a problem at this stage of the game and he thought we should all be in there when the safe was opened. And so did you object to that procedure? I did. And what happened after your objection? Carlos Baralt asked me to respect their wishes and to please not to be present when the safe was open. And when the safe was actually drilled, do you recall where you were? Either in the hallway next to the garage or I was outside behind the garage. And when the work was completed by the men who had come to do the work, did you see them exit the garage? Objection leading. Overruled. Yes, sir. And what happened after the workmen completed their work? The safe was open. You can decide who's going to see it. And then who, if anyone, went into the garage? Lyle and Eric went into the garage. Did you and Carlos remain outside? Miss Abramson says, objection leading, Your Honor. The court says sustained. Who remained outside? Objection assumes facts not in evidence. Overruled. Mr. Khan says, who remained outside while Eric and Lyle went into the garage? Carlos and I did. And what happened next? The safe was open, and as I said, there was nothing in there. So who said there was nothing in it? Lyle. After he made that statement to you, did you enter the garage? Yes, sir. Did you look for yourself? Yes, sir. Sometime after the opening of that safe, was the will found? Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object to that as leading and suggestive, Your Honor. The court says sustained. Mr. Khan says, sometime after the safe was opened, did you receive any information concerning the will being found? Objection. Still leading. Court says, as to what he got that information would be leading, or as to when, sorry. Mr. Khan says, do you recall receiving some information about a will being found? Yes, sir. And do you recall when that occurred? I don't remember if it was Wednesday or Thursday. I think it was Wednesday. I am not sure. Okay, now you say that you arrived on a Wednesday, is that correct? That's correct. And what day was it that you went to the safe? I believe it was Wednesday. Could have been Thursday. And do you recall when it was in relationship to the time that you went to the safe, that you received word that a will had been found? It seems that it was later that day. Okay. So at the time that you went to the safe, was that prior to the time you had received word that a will had been found? As I recall, it was. And what was your purpose for going to look at the safe that day with Carlos Peralt and the defendants? To see what was in the safe and to see if there was a will in the safe. Now, do you recall sometime that week going to a bank to look inside a safety deposit box? Yes, sir. And can you tell us when that occurred in relationship to the time that you received word that the will had been found? The next day, as I recall. And what was the purpose for going to the bank and looking inside the safety deposit box? To see if there was another will. So, do you recall where the bank was located? Only that it was in the Los Angeles area. Do you recall how you got to the bank? By car. I'm sorry, Your Honor, I couldn't hear, says Miss Abramson. The court says, let's have it read back. The last question and answer were read back. Mr. Khan says, do you recall who you went to the bank with? No, sir, I don't. Can you tell us who else was at the bank when you arrived there? Lyle and Erik, Carlos, and myself. And before anyone, went to open a safety deposit box, was there any discussion concerning who would be present at that time that the safety deposit box was opened? Yes, sir. And did you have a conversation with Lyle Menendez at that time? Yes, sir. And what, if anything, did Lyle Menendez say to you at that time? That he felt that he and Erik should be the only ones that are present when the safety deposit box was opened because there may be some things in there that would be embarrassing to his parents. And how did you respond to that request? I felt that Carlos Peralt, the named executor in the will that was found, should go in with them. Was there anyone else at the bank who voiced an opinion concerning that issue? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Was Were the bank officials in any way participating in this conversation? Yes, sir. And can you tell us what was said in that regard? The bank officials felt that the heirs, the sons of Kitty and Jose, and the named executor in the will should be the only ones that go into the safety deposit box. So did the bank officials then agree with you that the executor of the state, Carlos Baralt, should be present during the opening of the... Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, hearsay. Court says, sustained on the former grounds unless he was there and heard him say it. Mr. Khan says, did you hear a conversation from or involving some of the officials at the bank? Yes, sir. And who else was present during that conversation? Lyle, Erik, Carlos, and myself. And what opinion did they voice concerning who should be present at the time that the safety deposit box was opened? Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object to the form of the question as to whether they're forming an opinion or simply saying who's allowed. The court says, okay, don't argue it. Ms. Abramson says, sorry. The court says, calls for a conclusion on the part of the witness. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. And the court says, objection sustained. Mr. Khan says, can you tell us what you heard them say concerning the persons that would be present or should be present at the time of the opening? Ms. Abramson says, same objection. Mr. Khan says, of the safety deposit box. Ms. Abramson says, and I'll object to the word and should. Or object to the would and should. The court says, just what was said. Mr. Khan says, can you tell us what was said by the officials at the bank at that time? Simplify the question there. A bank officer said that the executors and the sons would be allowed to go in and look at the safety deposit box when they opened it. And at the time that and at that time, can you tell us the position that Carlos Perrault took? Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object to that as well, Your Honor, as calling for a conclusion. The court says yes, if he said something. Mr. Khan says, can you tell us what Carlos Perrault said at that time? Carlos Perrault said he was going to respect the wishes of the boys and not be with them when they opened the safety deposit box. So when the safety deposit box was open, was that outside your view? Yes, sir. And did you ever see the inside of that safety deposit box? No, sir. Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor. Okay, cross-examination. And Ms. Abramson is going to be doing cross-examination for Erik. And she asks, is there a junior tennis tournament, or as of 89, was there a junior tennis tournament in Kalamazoo, Michigan every summer? Objection beyond the scope. Overruled. The witness says was. Is that too fast? I'll do it again. Thank you. In August of 1989, you testified that you were going to go and that you, in fact, did go to Kalamazoo, Michigan for a tennis tournament, right? Yes, ma'am. And you lived in Downers Grove, Illinois, correct? Yes, ma'am. You still live there? Yes, ma'am. You keep a private plane at your home? You have a home that it has like a runway behind it? Yes, ma'am. Where the heck is that in Downer? I'm gonna have to look up where that might be. Uh, where there's like a airstrip. How long a flight is it from your home in Illinois to Kalamazoo, Michigan? Approximately an hour. Now, to your knowledge, based on the tennis competitions of your two nephews here, was there an annual junior tennis tournament in Kalamazoo, Michigan every year? Yes, ma'am. Did you attend that tournament more than once? Yes, ma'am. And when you attended it, did you attend solely to see your nephews, Erik and Lyle Menendez, play in it? Mr. Khan says, objection beyond the scope of direct. The court says, I'll permit this question and answer. You can answer it. The witness says, yes. Ms. Abramson says, and on how many occasions did you see Jose Menendez at the Kalamazoo, Michigan tennis tournament? Mr. Khan says, objection beyond the scope of direct. Sustained. Why, you asked him if you saw him there. So how is that beyond the scope? Ms. Abramson says, excuse me, have you seen Jose Menendez at that tournament before the day that you now say he made a statement to you? Objection irrelevant. Are you talking about that same week or during that tournament? The court says. Ms. Abramson says, ever that any year. Mr. Khan says, objection beyond the scope and irrelevant. The court says, I'll permit the inquiry very briefly on that subject. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Had you ever seen Jose before at that Kalamazoo tournament on prior years? Yes, ma'am. And were those years when Lyle was competing in those tournaments? Objection irrelevant and beyond the scope. The court says sustained. Well, that would be the last question in the area, Your Honor. I can ask it in a different way. The court says, okay. Ms. Andersen says, do you recollect whether Erik Menendez ever competed in that tournament before August of 1989? I believe he did. How many days before you flew your airplane to Kalamazoo for the tournament had your sister come to visit you? I think 2 or 3, maybe 4 days. And so you stayed at your home in Downers Grove for anywhere from 2 to 4 days before you left for the tournament? Yes, ma'am. And how many days before you left for the tournament had Erik Menendez come to your home? 1 or 2. 1 or 2? 1 or 2 days. And to your knowledge, Erik came in by himself? Yes, ma'am. He did not come with his mother? No, ma'am. To your knowledge, was he coming from a different part of the country than your sister was coming from? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. How's that hearsay if it's to his knowledge? These rulings are frustrating me. Ms. Anderson says, did you or anyone from your household, to your knowledge, meet Erik at the airport when he came in from wherever it was that he came from? Yes, ma'am. And who met him? As I recall, it was my sister. So his mother? His mother. And someone else? Jean Maloney, my uncle, and a woman who is now my daughter-in-law, Julie. Leslie says, I'm sorry, you have to speak up. He says, a woman who is now my daughter-in-law, Julie. Julie. Julie is married? Julie. Julie's married to one of your sons? Yes, ma'am. Your oldest son or youngest son? My youngest son. And so the three of them, Mrs. Menendez, Jean Maloney, and Julie, went to the airport to pick up Erik. That's correct. Did he come in at night or during the daytime? I don't recall. I think it was during the day, late in the day, perhaps. And was it that day or the next day that you say he had asked permission to use a telephone? The next day. And your understanding is he was telephoning to the airport, correct? Yes, ma'am. And the airport was at O'Hare? Yes, ma'am. There two airports in Chicago? There's many airports in Chicago. I mean, two big ones that would accept planes, say, from Los Angeles. Yes, primarily two. It's kind of a smart ass answer because everybody knows there's Midway and O'Hare if you live in Chicago. So that's kind of a pretentious jerk answer. There's many airports because there's a lot of like little airports if you have an airplane that you care about, you would know that there's lots of little airports around. But yes, there are Midway and O'Hare. If you live in Chicago, you know that inherently in your blood. All right. She says, yes, primarily. All right. Your understanding, though, is he was telephoning to O'Hare Airport, correct? Yes, ma'am. So that's not a long distance call, is it? It has an area code. It was a different area code. Back then, area codes, if you dialed someone outside of your own area code, it was a long distance call. So that's what that question's about. Okay. Is it an expensive call? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. No, it's not expensive. Ms. Abramson says, nevertheless, he asked your permission to make that call. He asked for a phone call to talk privately on, yes. So you have to speak up for us. I'm sorry. He wouldn't just go into another room of your house to use a phone without asking your permission? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Were you surprised that he asked your permission? Mr. Khan says object. Not even an objection, just object. Ms. Amerson says to use a phone privately. Objection, irrelevant. Sustained. Where did he have to go to use this private phone? There was no one in the rec room. I suggested he use the rec room phone. And you didn't listen in while he was on that phone? Not that I recall. So you didn't know at the time who he was calling? No, ma'am. Did he seem agitated or nervous or anything like that when he asked your permission to use the phone? He was somewhat excited. Okay. Seemed concerned? Yes, ma'am. Well, he was nervous because he didn't want to get in trouble for losing the camcorder. And then at some point you say there was a callback that you identified as coming from the baggage people at an airline. Yes, ma'am. And do you know that firsthand? Did you take the call? I was in the kitchen when the call came in. Did you hear the voice at the other end of the phone identifying himself or themselves or saying anything? No, ma'am. So, who took the call? Who? Let me start it this way. Who answered the phone call? My God, this guy just doesn't want to answer questions. My wife, Pat, may have. Kitty may have. Well, how did you know it was baggage people from an airline? Who told you? after the call was completed. Who told you? Either Erik or his mother. So you're not sure whether was on the phone or his mother was on the phone. That's correct. But one or the other told you that that was a call from an airline, correct? That's correct. And told you that they had found a camcorder that Erik had negligently left on an overhead compartment, correct? It's lucky they found it and somebody didn't take it for themselves. The call came back that Erik had left, they had the camcorder. So they had found it. They had it. They had the camcorder. And then Erik explained what he had been so excited about, that he had negligently left this on the airplane and was afraid that he had lost it, right? He didn't say he was afraid he lost it. He said he was happy they found it. Right. It was expensive, right? He didn't want to lose it. Wasn't that what he was conveying? He was relieved that they had found this expensive camera? Yes. And he asked permission to take a car and go right up to the airport and get it, didn't he? He asked his mother that. Okay, and you heard him ask her that? Yes, ma'am. Mom, can I have the keys to the car so I can go get the camera? Yes, ma'am. And she got angry with him, right? After the discussion about what he was going after. So she got angry with him when he said, Mom, I left the camera on the airplane and I'm real relieved it's there and I want to go get it, right? She did not know the camera existed. Huh? Okay. That's what you're saying now, but the fact is, she was angry at them, right? Yes, ma'am. Now, once she learned the camera existed, she used it repeatedly at the tennis tournament in Kalamazoo, correct? I only saw her using it once. Well, didn't you tell the prosecutors in this case that she made at least 12 different videos using the camera in Kalamazoo? You asked me if I saw it. Well, did you see her using it? Yes, ma'am. Did you later see a dozen different videos that she made using the camera at Kalamazoo after the homicide? At some point. Yes. So you didn't hear her tell Erik, this has to be returned, did you? No, ma'am. Your Honor, can I confer with co-counsel for a minute? The court says yes. The attorneys speak. Ms. Andersen says, now, did you hear a discussion in which Erik Menendez was explaining to his mother that Lyle and Mark Heffernan had purchased that camcorder earlier that summer for tennis? No, ma'am. You didn't hear that? No, ma'am. And did you ever see any bill for that camcorder or any figures that indicated how much it cost? No, ma'am. Excuse me? No, ma'am. Do you know how much camcorders cost? I was told by Erik that it was a $900 camera. $900. And he seemed impressed that that was expensive, right? Correct? I'm real glad I got that camera back. It cost $900. He didn't say that. When did he tell you it was $900? He said that Lyle had purchased the camcorder on his parents' Visa card and he could not believe that Lyle did that and it cost $900. So he acted as if that was a lot of money to him, correct? That he was excited about the fact that Lyle had purchased it for the price of it. Well, I'm asking you if the way he said it, that sounded like a lot of money, he was indicating that that was expensive to him. I suppose that it was. Did you even know that there was a Mark Heffernan that summer? Kitty and I had talked about tennis coaches. But did you know that they had a tennis coach named Mark Heffernan? Kitty discussed with me. I'm asking you yes or no. Yes. Rather than telling me what other people said. Yes. So you did know. And you know that he was someone who was working with both Erik and Lyle Menendez. Yes. Did you own a camcorder? No, ma'am. Did you see your sister using a camera at the Kalamazoo tennis tournament in addition to the camcorder? She may have. I don't recall. Did you know whether or not your sister and her husband owned cameras? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Had you ever seen them using cameras to shoot their sons playing tennis at any tournament that you attended? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Now, I think you've indicated you did hear Erik ask for the keys to the car so that he could go pick up the camera, but what you saw was that he and his mother went. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And you saw them return, and there was a bag, and you saw in the bag was the camcorder, correct? I saw the bag. You didn't see the camcorder inside the bag? The bag was closed. All right. When was the first time you actually saw the camcorder? I don't recall. Did I misunderstand you? Did you say that the intention was that you were going to go to the tennis match in Kalamazoo with Erik Menendez and his mother in your airplane? The intention, and we did. Did you go in your airplane? Yes. All of you? Yes. Isn't it true that Kitty Menendez and Erik Menendez drove there and in fact met you in the airport, picked you up at the airport? That's possible. I usually flew them up there. Well, you're saying it's possible, but I'm asking you, on this particular occasion, do you remember how it was that they went to Kalamazoo versus how it was that you went to Kalamazoo? I can't remember that particular year. I flew them or drove them. Normally, I would fly them up there. And do you recall testifying at the previous trial that they drove and you flew? That may have been the case. But he just said on direct that they flew there. And he just said that they all flew there. Okay. Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you your testimony from that trial? Do you know what you testified to the last time? I could have. I cannot recall. Sometimes I flew them, sometimes they drove themselves. This is complicated. We have to do this in stages. Do you remember what you testified to last time? Not precisely. Okay, let's start with that. Do you think it would refresh your memory as to what you testified to last time if I showed you that transcript of what you testified to? Yes, ma'am. Okay. I intend to show the witness pages 22568 through 22569, starting at line 25 and ending at line 5 on the next page. Now, Mr. Anderson, I'll give you this and ask you to read it to yourself, starting at line 25 and then on to next page to line 5. The witness complies and does so. Did they refresh your memory, at least as to what you testified to at the previous trial? Apparently, they drove on that particular occasion. Well, you testified that they drove. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Do you actually remember that they drove? At this particular time, I don't clearly recall whether they drove or flew them, or I flew them. Now, I'm going to jump over the bit at Kalamazoo since it doesn't involve my case and go ahead to August 21st, 1989. You received a telephone call from Marcy Eisenberg telling you about the homicides, correct? Yes, ma'am. And Marcy Eisenberg was Jose Menendez's personal assistant and secretary, correct? As I understood it, yes, ma'am. And you said then, uh, and you said you then made some travel arrangements. Yes, ma'am. Did Ms. Eisenberg indicate to you that the company that Jose worked for was making arrangements to accommodate the family here in Los Angeles? Mr. Khan says, objection, irrelevant, calls for hearsay. Court says, overruled. The witness says, yes, ma'am. And did you learn from Ms. Eisenberg that you should go to the Hotel Bellage? Yes, ma'am. And did you learn from Ms. Eisenberg that a limousine would meet you at the airport? Yes, ma'am. And when you were here in Los Angeles for that trip, was transportation provided for you? As I recall. So you didn't rent a car and drive yourself around, correct? Not that I recall. And that's where well, it's your belief that the Bellage Hotel is in Studio City? I don't know that much about the geography in Los Angeles. I guess I was guessing in that general area. And you never had to drive yourself there or away from there, so you weren't forced to learn. Is that a fair statement? I don't know that that's true. You don't know that that's true? That's correct. So do you remember ever driving yourself to that hotel? I don't know. Okay, well then why are you arguing? While you were here that time, I do not recall. Now, when you got in, a limousine picked you up and took you to that hotel, correct? That's what I recall. Then why are you arguing? Ugh. It just makes them look not reliable if you're just going to argue about the little things. All right. And you don't recall ever having stayed at the hotel before that, do you? No, ma'am. Had you ever visited the family home on Elm Drive in Beverly Hills before that week of August 21st, 1989? No, ma'am. Do you remember the name of the person at whose home the safe was located? Randy White. Randy White? That's correct. I believe it's right, not white. Had you ever heard of that person before? Yes, ma'am. And when had you heard of him before? I was introduced to Mr. White at the tennis tournament in Kalamazoo. And had you ever been to his house before the day that you went there to see the safe? No, ma'am. Now, you indicated that you found out there was, well, first of all, did you know that the family had a safe before you got here that week? Yes, ma'am. You did. Had you seen the family safe before? Yes, ma'am. Where had you seen it? I believe I've seen it in Calabasas. Whether it was the same safe, I don't know. So you had seen a safe in Calabasas at the rented house they had in Calabasas? Yes, ma'am. You had visited that house before? Yes, ma'am. You say you don't know if it's the same safe. You don't remember now if you recognized it when you saw it at Mr. White's house. No, ma'am. Now you said that it was Lyle Menendez who told you that it was a safe that the safe was at someone's house. That's correct? Yes, ma'am. You didn't know that before he told you that. Not to my knowledge. In fact, you didn't ask about it either before he told you. Uh, what? In fact, you didn't ask about it either before he told you that. Isn't that correct? I don't recall. So he just simply told you the family safe is over at this man's house for safekeeping, correct? It was a discussion on the safe that ensued that day. And what day? The day that he told me. And you don't really remember which day it was that he told you, do you? I believe it was Wednesday after I arrived. Now you're saying it's Wednesday. Now you're certain? That's what I believe. Excuse me? That's what I recall. So that morning, you weren't as certain. Is that a fair statement? Is that a question? Yes. Would you repeat the question, please? Yes. The morning when you first testified out of the presence of the jury, you were not so certain what day it was that you went and saw the safe. Isn't that true? I'm still not certain which day it is. I just think that it was Wednesday. All right, so you think it was Wednesday. Sorry, Your Honor. Now it's your recollection that. Well, strike that. Where'd the locksmith come from? I don't know. You have no idea? No. You don't remember the locksmith in the limousine with yourself and Mr. Baralt and Erik and Lyle Menendez going to Mr. Wright's house, do you? No. And is it your recollection that the locksmith wasn't even called until after you got to Mr. Wright's house? I don't have recollection of that. But that's what you testified to this morning about before the jury was called back, isn't it? When we arrived there, the locksmith was not there. I thought that's what I testified to this morning. Court says you have to speak up. The witness says, when I arrived there, the locksmith was not there. That's what I testified to this morning. Ms. Abramson says, well, you said that. Well, let me just ask you one preliminary question. When you heard from Lyle, when Lyle told you that the safe was at a home in Beverly Hills at Mr. Wright's house, he was telling you or telling that to both you and Carlos Baralt at the same time, correct? It's possible. Well, that's what you testified to this morning, isn't it? It's possible we were together at the time. Mr. Anderson, do you remember what you testified about this morning? Yes, ma'am. All right. Did you say that this morning that Lyle told it to you and to Carlos Baralt at the same time? I don't remember everyone that was in the audience at the time. Carlos Baralt and I were together most of that time. That's not what I asked you, sir. I'm sorry. I realized it's late. Perhaps you're tired. Mr. Khan says, I'm going to object to the commentary from counsel, Your Honor. I ask that counsel be admonished to. The court says, all right, well, there was nothing wrong with what she said, so let's ask the question. Why are you getting so mad, Mr. Khan? Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, are you okay? I'm fine. Getting tired, but it's fine. All right. I just want to get clear. Did you testify this morning that Lyle told you and Carlos Baralt that the safe was at Mr. Wright's home at the same time? I don't remember making that statement. All right. And are you saying that statement is not true? No, ma'am, I'm not saying that. Oh my God, he's just being so difficult, just to be difficult. So did Lyle Menendez tell you and Carlos Baralt that the safe was at Mr. Wright's house at the same time? That's possible. And he told you this at the Beverly Hills house, the Elm Drive home of the Menendez family, as I recall. And therefore, if that happened, if he told you and Mr. Baralt at the same time, that meant Mr. Baralt was also at the house on Elm Drive where Lyle Menendez told you about the location of the safe. Is that correct? If everything else was true, I guess that would be true too. All right. Now, you then went to the right home. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And did you testify this morning that there was a discussion at the right home about having the safe drilled and a discussion about getting a locksmith? A locksmith was not there when we arrived. Was there a discussion about getting one? Yes. Like, are you even listening to the question, buddy? Was a locksmith called? A locksmith arrived. Yes. That's not what. Can you just listen to the question? He had been called before I got there, or after, but he arrived after I got there. So when you first testified about this morning, Mr. Anderson, you indicated, did you not, that the calls to the locksmith were made after you got to Mr. Wright's house? They may have been, but that may not have been the initial call. Okay. And then I reminded you that you had actually called Mr. Wright and made arrangements to go over there before you got there, correct? So he called Mr. Wright beforehand, and called beforehand to get or to let him know he was coming. He says that's correct. And that's when you remembered there had been a contact between yourself and Mr. Wright before you and the rest of the family got to Mr. Wright's home, correct? That's correct. But right now, would it be fair to say you don't remember who contacted the locksmith or how the locksmith got there? That's correct. In fact, is it fair to say you don't remember how many locksmiths got there? Only one company came. But you don't know how many men. It was more than one. Okay. And you said the person who you were the person who paid. Is that correct? That's correct. And did you pay in cash? Yes, ma'am. Did you get a receipt? Yes, ma'am. Do you have it? I don't know if I do. I've not seen it. I may have given it to Carlos. I don't know. So you may have given it to Carlos Baralt? Yes. Now, this garage, was it attached to the right home? As I recall, it was. And was there a way to get into the garage right through the house? As I recall, there was. And what else was in the garage besides the safe? I don't have recall of what else was in the garage. So you don't have a memory of anything in that garage besides the safe? I do not recall what was in the garage other than the safe. And in fact, do you recall what was in the safe once you looked inside? Not specifically. There was something in the safe, wasn't there? There was. And wasn't what was in the safe the key to the safety deposit box and the instructions on how to find the safety deposit box? I do not recall that. Oh, okay. So now you're just gonna play dumb. Got it. We're just playing dumb here. And okay. That's the thing. That's why he's not answering any of the questions. He's just being evasive and playing dumb for whatever reason. So you've recalled that in the past when you discussed this with the prosecutors, didn't you? I don't, it's the same question. I don't recall that. Do you recall telling Detective Zoller, Mr. Khan, and Ms. Nahara on February 22nd or 23rd, it's not clear, 1994, that once the safe was opened, he, being yourself, and Carlos were told by Lyle and Erik that there was nothing of any importance in the safe except for the keys to the bank safety deposit box plus instructions on the location of that box? Did you tell that to the prosecutors and Detective Zoller in February of 1994? I may have. I don't recall that. Do you recall that happening, though? That Lyle or Erik or both of them told you what's in the safe is the key to another place, the safety deposit box? I think I've been answering that question, and the answer is I don't recall that. Now, you've testified that they were all alone in the garage when they looked in the safe, correct? Yes, ma'am. So they had an opportunity, according to your version, to take those keys and those instructions and conceal them from you, correct? I was not with them. So they could have done that? I don't know what they could have done. Well, let me just ask you physically. Physically, you could not have seen them if they had chosen to remove the safety deposit box or the safety deposit key and the instructions from the safe. That's correct. And then you wouldn't have even known there was a safety deposit box, correct? I don't know that that's true. Really? Okay. Well, did you have any other records of a safety deposit box that you now can recall? There may have been other documents, receipts. I don't recall how I would know there was a safety deposit box. You seem to recall in February that the reason you knew that is because Lyle or Erik or both told you, correct? I don't recall how I knew there was a safety deposit box. Really? So you're having difficulty then, Mr. Anderson, remembering what you said in February of 1994. Is that a fair statement? I don't recall what the conversation was regarding the safety deposit box. In February of 94? That's correct. And you don't recall what the conversation was about a safety deposit box in August of 1989 either. Is that true? As to when it was or where it was? As to how you even knew it was. That's correct. Now, did you leave Mr. Wright's residence at some point? Yes, ma'am. That day, whenever that day was? Yes, ma'am. Did you leave? Where did you go when you left there? I don't recall. And how did you leave there? The same way I got there, in the car with Carlos Beralt. And who was driving that car? Carlos Beralt. Carlos was driving a car, as I recall. You don't recall that it was a limousine, is that correct? I do not. And where did you go? I don't recall. And what time of day was it? Late in the day. Late? Evening? Dark? No. What time was it when you got there? Middle of the day. I don't recall exactly. How long were you there? I'm guessing an hour. And where did Erik go? I don't remember. Do you remember him going anywhere? I do not recall. Where did Lyle Menendez go? I don't recall. And I take it you don't recall anything that happened the rest of that day, correct? At this time, no. Now, where were you physically when you learned or was told that a will had been found? I was at the Bel Air Hotel. And the Bel Air Hotel is different than the Bellage Hotel, correct? Yes, ma'am. And what were you doing at the Bel Air Hotel? Carlos and I went there to meet with Lyle, I believe. And were you meeting with Lyle when you heard some information indicating that a will had been found? I don't remember if he was still there or not. Well, do you remember at some point after you learned that a will had been found that Carlos and Lyle left the Bel Air Hotel and went to the house? Carlos left. Lyle may have gone with him. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Carlos left. Lyle may have been with him. I don't remember. All right, but you didn't leave. No, ma'am. You stayed at the Bel Air? Yes, ma'am. And what were you doing there after they left? Waiting for someone to pick me up. Well, why didn't you go with them? As I recall, someone else was supposed to show up there and I was supposed to meet with them. Okay, now let me ask you this. Back in November of 1993, during the first trial, were you interviewed by Mrs. Bazanich, who was the previous lead prosecutor in this case? It was about that time, yes, ma'am. And did you tell Mrs. Bazanich that Lyle and Erik found the will and handed it to Carlos? I don't recall. It was a very emotional time. I recognize, Mr. Anderson, that August of 1989 was a very emotional time. Was November 21st of 1993 also an emotional time? Yes, ma'am. You don't remember telling Mrs. Bazanich that statement? I don't remember the sequence of events as to who found the will. Are you now saying you don't know whether or not Erik and Lyle found the will? No, ma'am. How is his memory just so bad? I mean, I got a bad memory now with age, but it's also my medications and my disease, my autoimmune stuff. But this dude, he just can't remember everything. But I don't think it's amnesia. I think it's selective amnesia. Didn't you just say that when you heard about it, you were at the Bel Air meeting with Lyle and Carlos, and you think Lyle left and went back to the house? I don't remember if Lyle was still there or left with Carlos. So if Carlos Baralt has a better memory than you, and he says that he was there at the Bel Air, and he and Lyle left the Bel Air and went back to the house when he had heard about the will, would that be more reliable than your memory? Mr. Khan says objection, assumes facts, not in evidence, no evidence of, the court says sustained. Miss Abramson says, in fact, do you remember telling Mrs. Bazanich specifically concerning the discovery of the will that the defendants were with Terry and when they found the will? Objection calls for hearsay, no prior inconsistent statement. Sustained. Did you ever know that? Objection. Well, strike that. Did you ever say that to Mrs. Bazanich? Objection calls for hearsay. I don't think it's hearsay, says Mrs. Bazanich. Your Honor, be happy to be heard. The court says, why don't you repeat what it is that you're asking him? All right. Do you recall? Let me ask you this. You don't know now, and you're not now testifying that Lyle and Erik found the will with Terry, are you? No, ma'am. And you're not now testifying that Lyle and Erik found the will and handed it to Carlos, is that correct? Carlos who? I don't know. Any Carlos. You're not testifying to that now. No, ma'am. But did you tell both? There's a Carlos Menendez and a Carlos Baralt, so. But did you tell both of those things to Mrs. Bazanich in November of 93? Objection, no foundation, no personal knowledge. That's what he said. Sustained. Well, I'm not offering it for the truth. I'm offering it as simply his saying something that is inconsistent with what he's saying now. The court says, well, it's irrelevant because if someone else told him something and he just repeated what someone else said, it wouldn't have been proven. You're trying to go to what he saw or didn't see. Ms. Anderson says, well, I don't want to quibble with it now, Your Honor. But was it your understanding that Erik and Lyle found the will? Did Erik and Lyle ever tell you that they found the will? I don't recall that. Did anybody else ever tell you that they found the will? Objection calls for hearsay. That who found the will? That the defendants found the will? Overruled. Again, I don't recall that. So if you did tell Mrs. Bazanich that the defendants found the will, were you making it up? Objection, argumentative, assumes facts, not an evidence. Sustained. How? That's a question. Um, Well, I guess if it's facts not in evidence because she didn't read in. You can't bring in a police report, which is stupid because it's hearsay. But I mean, it's not stupid, but it is in some ways. Um, so Ms. Abramson says, would you say, Mr. Anderson, that that after you came to Los Angeles on August 23rd, 1989, you assisted Carlos Baralt in trying to find the most recent will of Kitty and Jose Menendez? Yes, ma'am. And wasn't the effort to look in the safe part of that effort to find the most recent will? I don't remember that was the case. Oh my God, this guy. And is it your testimony now that you can't recall whether you're over to the right house occurred on the day that you arrived or the day after? That's correct. And isn't it true that when you went to the right house, WRIGHT, the right house, you were looking for a second will? I think you asked that question. I don't recall that. Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the statement that you gave in February of 1994 to Mr. Khan, Ms. Nahara, and Detective Zoller? It may. Ms. Abramson says, I want to underline something, Your Honor, make it easier. Mr. Anderson, if you would take your time and just read this paragraph at the bottom of this page, particularly the line I've underlined, and then the paragraph on the next page. The witness does so. Okay, what is the question? Didn't you tell these prosecutors and Detective Zoller in February of 1994 that the trip to Randy Wright's house was to look for a second will? Apparently. And in fact, if you want, I can show you Detective Zoller's notes. Do you think that might refresh your recollection as well? I think it's if it's the same, it's the same. So isn't it true, Mr. Anderson, that the original will, the one that's been probated, was found before you ever went to Mr. Wright's house and looked at the safe? Based on my understanding at that time, yes. Okay. And do you think your memory's getting better as the years go by, or do you think it's getting worse? Question as to my memory, probably getting worse as time goes by. That's typically what happens, isn't it? Yeah. Your Honor, I think this would be a good place to break. The court says, okay, we'll resume tomorrow at 8:30. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys today because I've got hip pain and I'm going to try to get you guys 3 videos a week. I know it's a stretch for me, but I'm going to try to do shorter videos more times a week because it's just hard for me to sit and do long videos. I'm not promising anything right now, but I'm going to try to do that. So we'll see how I feel going forward. So that's kind of what I'm planning, but we'll see how that goes. So, all right, thank you guys so much for watching. We will pick up where we left off with Uncle Brian Anderson in the next stream. Thank you guys again for watching. Please hit that like button on your way out, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.